The FBI has officially identified him as America's most prolific serial killer. He confessed to 93 murders, and more than 60 of those killings have been officially confirmed. This killer had a photographic memory. He could perfectly draw the face of every woman he had killed, even decades later. The year was 1940. In the U.S. state of Georgia, a baby boy was born and named Samuel Little. At the time, no one could have imagined that this seemingly ordinary child would one day become one of the most notorious and terrifying serial killers in American history. Samuel's early life was marked by instability and loneliness. According to widely reported accounts, he was abandoned by his mother shortly after birth and was largely raised by his grandmother. Despite having a family member who cared for him, his childhood was troubled, and over the years, he developed a long history of criminal behavior that eventually escalated into violent crimes. During his school years, Samuel was not like most other children. While many of his classmates focused on studies and sports, he was already developing a pattern of delinquent behavior. He became involved in thefts, burglaries, and frequent fights, and his violent temper often brought him into trouble. It did not take long for law enforcement to notice him. In 1956, at the age of just 16, Samuel was arrested for burglary. Because he was still a minor, the court sent him to a juvenile correctional facility rather than an adult prison, where he spent several months. However, those months did little to change his behavior. Instead, his time in detention, combined with his background in boxing, appeared to strengthen his confidence and reduce his fear of the law. After his release, he continued down a criminal path that, over the following decades, would make him one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. This marked the beginning of the dark and disturbing story of Samuel Little, a true crime case that spans from his troubled youth to his eventual arrest, and one that many consider stranger and more chilling than fiction. It was December 1970 in the bright, bustling city of Miami. Neon lights filled the streets, music echoed from local clubs, and the nightlife was in full swing. Sitting quietly in the corner of one of those clubs was Samuel Little, watching the crowd and looking for someone vulnerable. His attention eventually turned to Mary Brosley, a 33-year-old woman who, according to later accounts, was struggling with homelessness and difficult circumstances. Samuel approached her with a calm and friendly manner, gaining her trust through casual conversation and false sympathy. To Mary, he appeared to be just another stranger willing to listen. After some time, the two left the club together and drove away from the city. The bright lights of Miami faded behind them as they reached a more isolated area. According to Samuel's later confession, he attacked Mary and ultimately took her life. When her body was eventually discovered, investigators were unable to immediately connect the crime to a larger pattern. The case remained unresolved for many years, allowing Samuel to continue evading capture. That first known killing marked the beginning of a decades-long series of murders that would eventually lead the FBI to identify Samuel Little as one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. After his first known murder, Samuel's crimes became increasingly frequent, beginning a decades-long killing spree that would shock the United States. Investigators and profilers later suggested that he had developed a powerful sense of superiority and control, often described as a God complex, believing he could take lives without ever being caught. For nearly 40 years, Samuel Little traveled across the country, using America's highways to move from one state to another. He carefully chose victims who were often overlooked by society, including women experiencing homelessness, addiction, or involvement in sex work. Because many of these victims had limited support networks, their disappearances often went unnoticed for long periods. His modus operandi was remarkably consistent. He would gain a victim's trust through friendly conversation, persuade her to leave with him, and then attack in an isolated location. Rather than using conventional weapons, he relied on physical force, which often made the crimes more difficult for investigators to connect. One portrait followed another, eventually totaling 93 claimed victims. Investigators were struck not only by the accuracy of the drawings, but also by Samuel's calm and detached attitude while creating them. According to those involved in the investigation, he showed little visible remorse as he recalled events from decades earlier. When Samuel Little died, he left behind a collection of victim sketches that remain part of FBI records today. Those portraits continue to help investigators and families seeking answers, serving as a haunting reminder that some of the darkest crimes can remain hidden for many years before the truth finally emerges. By 2012, Samuel was an elderly man in his 70s, and his health had significantly declined. Living on the margins of society, he was arrested in Kentucky on relatively minor charges. As part of the routine booking process, authorities collected a DNA swab and entered it into the national database. Moments later, investigators received an unexpected result. Samuel's DNA matched forensic evidence from 3 unsolved homicide cases dating back to the 1980s in Los Angeles. After decades of remaining unidentified, the man behind those cold cases had finally been found. The discovery immediately drew the attention of detectives and the FBI. What had started as a routine arrest quickly turned into one of the most significant breakthroughs in modern American criminal investigations. But the most shocking part of the story was still to come. Once Samuel was brought into the interrogation room, investigators realized they were not dealing with an ordinary suspect. The conversations that followed would eventually connect him to dozens of murders across the United States and reveal the true scale of his crimes. After nearly 4 decades of spreading fear across America, Samuel Little died in prison on December 30th, 2020, at the age of 80. But the dark legacy of his crime still haunts history.